Now this lecture is some practical problems solved in the darkroom when I'm making prints. And the negatives that I'm printing are from the previous lecture that I called Developing Your Film Wrong, if you might remember. And with that Developing Your Film Wrong, there was a certain sound that came with it. But realistically, the idea is you're overexposing your film for contrasty scenes and then underdeveloping. And then where you have flat light or you want more contrast or graphic stuff, you're underexposing your film and then overdeveloping, like that. So they also call that in the commercial world pushing and pulling. Pulling is when you underdevelop, pushing is when you overdevelop. And it implies the exposure that you gave that would work with that idea. So this is practical printing from negatives that were developed wrong.
Hi kids, it's Professor Agar back again with his sidekick, Miss Laura Sargent, our director. And you know what she does? She tells me we're going to have this a moment where we're going to talk a little more about photography. She wakes me up early, she makes sure I'm sober, and she supplies me with lots of coffee. So here I am. The last time we talked, I talked about overexposure and underdevelopment, and also underexposure and overdevelopment. Let me do that with a hand gesture. Overexposure and underdevelopment, and underexposure and overdevelopment. There, that puts that in your brain. Now, from last summer, and this is very recent for me, I have some pictures, and I took time over the holidays to make some prints, and I thought this lecture could be about practical printing, where we make use of burning and dodging, and also make use of filters. So here's some pictures, negatives that I developed from this last summer, and in this lesson we're going to talk about the practical difficulties of making a print. I'm going to start with this one here because it does represent that technique of overexposure and underdevelopment. And it's a series of trees in a little field, and I pass by this every day as I take my dog to the park. And throughout the seasons, it changes. This is the middle of the summer, and the areas that you see here in the middle are shadow areas, and that's why you can see through. I take my finger there, and you can see my finger through there. So it's clear. There is some density, but very little. And then there's other areas that look black, but these are the highlighted areas. This is where the sun is hitting the little flowers. I like the little flowers in the foreground. They're dandelions. And then there's a field in back where they play soccer out there, and that's also in broad daylight. In terms of the composition and the way the light is, I do prefer this one, just looking at it. And also, when I look at this one here, I see there's a little more detail in the shadows than this one, and I'm thinking this one here. But also the sun has come in here, and so it has dappled light. I like that. If I take my little grain magnifier, I can see there's detail in the trunks of the tree, and that was sort of important to be able, because I based my exposure by walking into the scene and basing my exposure on the tree and the shadowed grass. And then I came back, made the composition. I made two different compositions. So I'm choosing this one to make my print. So I'm getting out my 4x5 film holders here, and actually these are I cut these film holders out so that you see the full frame. Sometimes the film holders cut into the image a little bit, and I take my image here holding it in my hand, and I turn it upside down so that it when I project it, it's going to be right side up on the easel. I get that little guy right in there like that. Come on, buddy. Come on. There you go, just like so. Get that, like that. Put this guy on top, thusly. And now we're ready to go into the darkroom. Okay, follow me. Come on. Don't be afraid. There's safe lights in here. Okay, kids, so here we are in North Hennepin Community College's darkroom. And it's a little different setup than my own darkroom. There's a different timer here, but I'll just talk us through it. And I actually made the prints previously to save time, but I'm showing you what I did to make these prints. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'll just turn on the enlarger light to show you what the negative looks like in the enlarger. Remember, we pointed out that this area was the shadow area because it looks white, and then this area is the density of showing the sunlight. So it looks a little darker, and this looks more clear, and then way in the background is an illuminated field way back here, and that's got the most intense light on it. Normally, what I would do for a test strip is I'd stop the lens down to about a middle or a small aperture, like f/22 or something like that. But then you can't see what I'm doing. So I'm going to keep it open, full exposure. This is f/5.6. But that's too bright for making prints, usually, and for doing test strips, just so you know. And now I'm ready to actually turn on the timer. Now, the type of timer I use, we don't use here at the school. I use a Gray Lab timer. The Gray Lab timer simply goes backwards. And I usually do increments of time at about 2.5 seconds. So 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10. Out here at school, our timers are set for 3 seconds. So it's 3, 6, 9, 12, like that. Anyway, so here we go. Now I'll turn off the enlarger. I'll pull out my test strip, which could be a half a sheet or it could be a full sheet. I think I did both, and I'll show you the example. And I'm going to hold the cardboard over the lens, turn on my light. I'm looking at my Gray Lab timer, and when it gets to a certain point, I'm ready to pull it away, and it goes 2.5 seconds, and then 5, 7.5, 10, 12.5, 15, 17.5, 20 seconds for my test strip. So now I'm going to develop it, and let's go out and take a look at it. Turn the light off, pull the cardboard away. I'll meet you outside. Here is my test strip, and this is actually, I did just sort of a brief test strip. I just took a piece of paper, ripped it in half, and did 2.5, 5, 7.5, 10, 12.5, 15 seconds, and here's what. And then I actually did a whole sheet so it looked more nice, and it's. This one right here, it's a little curly, but here I scanned it for you to see, and it's the same idea, 2.5, 5, 7.5, going up to about 20 seconds. And when I looked at this, I said, okay, the one that I think I like the best for my overall exposure should be around in here. I like the way the flowers are here. I can see detail here in the background. The middle ground in here, the shadow, looks pretty good, pretty good. So I went ahead and made a print at about 15 seconds. And here is my first print at 15 seconds. And I looked at it and I said, well, it's too dark. Why is it too dark? Well, this area here I thought was a little dark. And then also I couldn't see the detail in the trees, the bark. And I went in there and I metered that bark so I could actually see it. So I think maybe instead of 15 seconds, let's try maybe 12.5 seconds. And let's see what that looks like. So then I did another print at 12.5 seconds. And at 12.5, this area opens up a little bit. I like it better. And the field in the back, still pretty good. Foreground, still pretty good. So I'm pleased, but as I looked at it, I'm thinking it would be nice if the trees were just a little bit lighter. So what I decided is I had about 12.5 seconds to make a print, but 12.5 seconds to dodge each one of these trees, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. 12.5 seconds is too short. So I'm going to take my aperture of my lens and go from, it was at f/16, I'm going to go to f/22, and I'm going to, that would double the time. Instead of 12 and a half seconds, you got 25 seconds. That's heavy math, but it's the truth. And then that would give me time to dodge each one of the trees. So let's go into the darkroom and do that. Come on. Okay. Little dodging device. So here we are back in the darkroom, and I brought in my little dodging device. It's a little piece of wire, and you can cut out whatever shape you need. And the idea is to be able to dodge something, make it lighter, inside the print. Which, I mean, it's hard to get your hand in there without your wrist, doing things. So this is something I learned from my dad years ago. I'll turn the light of the enlarger off, and I'll get out my photo paper. And then I'll go ahead and cover up the lens. And I'm looking at my Gray Lab timer, and I'm going to start. It's going to be 25 seconds total. So here we go. We're starting right now. And then during that 25 seconds, I'm going to take my little dodging device, and I'll just hold each tree for about 5 seconds. Each one held for about 5 seconds. And there we are at 20 seconds. Pull it away, let it go for the final 5 seconds, cover up the lens, turn off the enlarger, and let's go see what that one looks like. Should have trees that are a little bit lighter so we can see the bark. Okay, let's go out. So here we are with our print where we dodge the trees. And if I look at it, I can definitely see detail in the trees. Now, these are RC prints. And when we print fiber, we're going to be able to see even a little more tone. RC tends to be pretty snappy. And so with fiber, you're going to have maybe a little a softer response. And then once you selenium tone your fiber paper, then you're going to have a real nice feeling in those lower mid tones. But for right now, I can see detail in the tree. But the final thing that I object to is I notice on the upper right, it's a little bright. And I want to get that a little bit darker to match the darkness over on the left-hand side. Right, left. So we're going to darken this here in one more print. And also I'm going to darken the bottom just a little bit more, especially over on the bottom left. And I'm going to darken this area in here to get it, bring out the darkness in the tree. I like that tree. I want that nice and black and maybe a little more tone in the full sunlit valley there behind all these trees. Now to darken the sides, that's quite easy. I can just take my cardboard and I can cover up the paper and darken it like this and like this. But to darken in the middle is a little harder. And for this technique, I'll just use my hands. A technique my dad taught me, and he probably got it from Minor White or Ansel Adams or one of those guys. All you do is take your hand, cover up the lens, and then take your other hand and form like a little circle. So you're like this. And spread your hand out, and you can make it big or small. And the idea is that you're letting light through the circle in your hands, like that. See, and it kind of diffuses the light a little bit, and that's good. Then you don't see sharp edges. You could, if you wanted to, cut a hole in the middle of a cardboard. So that's you could do that too. But then my hands are always available. More or less. Okay, so let's go in and finish that last print. Yeah, is it? Yeah, it's red. We're going to keep those trees just the way they are. I like them. We're going to take the top right, burn in a little bit, and I'm going to show you how you burn in the middle of the print. So first, we'll go ahead and we'll turn on the enlarger. We're going to keep our eyes there on the timer. And there it is, and I'm ready. So here we go, total of 25 seconds. We're going to dodge this guy for about 5 seconds, this guy for about 5 seconds, this guy for about 5 seconds, final tree about 5 seconds. Keep it moving. There it is, another 5 seconds, total of 25. Now I take the cardboard. The clock continues to run, and I have not turned off the enlarger. I'm going to take my cardboard, which is kind of thin, but it is opaque, And I'm going to pull the cardboard back, and I'm burning in the top right-hand side of the photograph for about 5 seconds, or 7.5 seconds. Then I cover, and I still haven't turned the enlarger off. And now I'm going to do the foreground just a little bit more, especially in the lower left. Just a little bit. And now I'm ready to burn the center trees where that field is. And to do that, I'm going to take my hand, hold it under the lens. The light cannot pass through my hand. Bring my other hand over, form a little circle, and then burn in that area through the gap in my hands to give that a little dark, and that's it. Now I can turn off the enlarger and develop the paper. So here's my final print. I can see detail in the trees. This is nice and dappled in here. Plenty of detail in the grass. Foreground's burnt in appropriately. I burned this upper left-hand corner, and then this has come out very nicely. And as an 8x10, this is a small print on RC, it has a certain look. When I go to 11x14 and 16x20, if I ever get that far, on fiber paper, it will take on a different appearance, but this is the way I always start in doing all of my printing. To start fairly small, like and quick, like RC paper, 8x10, and then move up the chain. Not all the pictures, obviously, that I take of end up being large prints. So, but it's just one way of finding out if the picture is sharp and what you need to do before you pull out a sheet of $5 16x20 inch or 20x24 inch paper, which is expensive. Now, let's take another set of problems, but before I do that, I wanted to show you the Gray Lab timer. So here's our my Gray Lab, well, school's Gray Lab timer. I have one at home also. It's a little cleaner. We use this one in developing film. It counts backwards. As you see, the second hand here sweeps backwards, and as it counts backwards, the minute hand moves. So it goes from 59 seconds all the way down to 0, and then it stops, and you reset it. So when I'm in the darkroom, what I do for making prints is I'll start at a certain time, like here I'm starting at maybe at 0. I'll turn on the enlarger light, and then at 2.5 seconds, cardboard moves. 5 seconds, move the cardboard. 7.5 seconds, like that. 10 seconds. So those are my time increments. Here at school, we have different timers, and they automatically control the time at whatever interval you want. So we usually set it at 3 seconds. So this is the Gray Lab timer. Just wanted to show you what I was doing in the darkroom. I'll turn this guy off. This negative that I want to show you represents a technique called underexposure over development. So I give a little less exposure, or base my exposure on making sure that I've got some good blacks in the photograph, in the negative, go into the photograph, and then have good detail in the whites by giving a little longer development. Now this technique is fairly simple. The beauty of this is that it helps bring out more contrast in making a print. Now in printing, I might have said this before, it's easier to get more contrast in printing than it is less contrast. So many photographers will always overexpose a little, try X at 200 instead of 400, and then instead of developing at normal time, whatever the Kodak says, or Ilford or whatever, a little less, maybe 10%, so that it takes the edge off the whites and they don't force you to burn them in. Now in this particular picture, which I'm searching for a title, but it represents a series I did of all these dumpsters in my neighborhood. They're rebuilding all these houses, and our house we bought, I don't know, 30 years ago, and it was like $60,000. Now it's like worth big bucks, so we couldn't afford our own house, but that's the way economy goes. Anyway, so I like these dumpsters because I think they're very picturesque. This one has a big T on it and a lot of paint splatters. I chose to print this one today, and when I made my print, test strip, and then I did a picture at about 12.5 seconds, and the print looked a little like this. And I thought, the blacks are not real black, and pretty good detail in the whites though, but it could be maybe a little bit darker. So then, instead of 12.5 seconds, I went 15 seconds. And 15 seconds, the black's got a little more vigorous, and there's still pretty good detail in the whites. I like the white paint going over the white of the numbers. And so I thought that looked cool. But you know, I wanted something even more of a visual statement. So I thought, well, let's do more contrast. There's a couple ways of doing contrast. One is through development, but that's, you know, once you've developed the film, that's it. Well, actually, you could selenium tone your negative, and that's another story where you get a little more contrast by selenium toning your negative, and that's kind of fun. But no, I chose to use filters, and the type of enlarger I have, you can just dial in the filters, but if you don't have one of those type of enlargers, you just buy a filter kit from either Ilford, and there's other manufacturers too. And these filters then have colors that change the color of the light bulb in your enlarger, and then that affects the different layers of contrast in your paper. Your paper is built for different, if you're using multi-grade variable contrast type paper. So I chose to use I experimented with various contrast levels. Ilford has their kit goes up to 5. 2 is normal, 5 is more contrast. They also have 0, 00, not quite as effective, but you know, they make them available. I tried everything, but I finally decided on a 3. And with the 3, I was able to get a more vigorous contrast. I was also able to still retain the detail of the white paint going over the white letters. And then I also, one other thing I did, which I already explained in the other print of the field, is that I burned in this corner just a little bit because it was getting a little bit light, and I wanted the numbers really to stand out. So there's 2 different examples of development techniques and problems that might occur in the darkroom when you're making prints. Both ways I showed you are merely ways to get at a visual end to make your photograph work for you and your viewing audience. We'll see you at our next adventure. Ciao.
Because the idea of pushing implies that you've underexposed. It implies that you're shooting at night and you need more oomph. So that's pushing. And then pulling implies that you took your 400 film and you rated it at 100 and you didn't know what you were doing because you had drank too much the previous night. So pushing and pulling, then I guess that's a more standard commercial way of saying it. So anyway, there you go.